Good morning, everybody. This is Pauline Chung. I'm with the San Mateo Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing. Honored today to have David Petrovay. Is that pronounced correctly?
Yes.
Okay, and longtime chamber member, even was a BRN member before. When I mentioned BRN1, they said he was a member. Yeah, so he's David's certified career coach, counselor, owns his own coaching business. He has over 20 years of experience working with over 1,000 individuals to help them identify their career goals, create resumes to reflect their skills and accomplishments, and prepare them for interviews, and learn ways to effectively communicate. He's worked in school, public government agencies, nonprofit agencies, and private practice settings. He has a master's degree in counseling and guidance and a doctorate in education, both from the University of Arizona. And he's focused on career development. He's a frequent presenter at national, state, and local level. I lost my place. Job. The CareerOneStop National Advisory Board, he serves on that, and he's author of a recently published book, Life Between Jobs, Out of Work, ... not out of work. So I'm going to turn this over to David, and not need to worry about screen sharing. He's going to be talking, and it will be interactive. He will ask you to participate a couple of times during this session. So I look forward to your talk, David. Thank you so much for joining us today. And welcome, Kathy's just joined us.
Yes, and welcome to everyone. And we have an international group of participants, or actually national, with Grace being in Florida. So welcome. And I think we need to hit the ground running because we have a lot to cover related to who would hire me. And in the work that I do and have done, I hear so much from people who are a certain age, I won't tell you what that is, saying, no one will hire me. No, I'm too old. I'm too old. No one would even think to consider me. So we're going to challenge that whole approach to ageism. And we won't cover everything. Obviously, we only have a half an hour, but we'll hit a lot of the salient points. So I'd like to begin by just asking the question, we're in a 30-minute time period. I'm going to give you two statements, and you, through a raise of hands, tell me which one you relate to. 30 minutes. At the end of 30 minutes, I will be 30 minutes older. Or at the end of 30 minutes, I will have 30 minutes of new information to apply to my life. Okay? Raise your hand if you're the first one that says, I'll be 30 minutes older. Okay? How about I'll have 30 minutes of new opportunity and new knowledge? Raise your hand for that one if that applies. Okay, great. This is about a mindset, okay? You can think about age as either a number or a mindset. So this is really about strengthening that whole concept of mindset. So let's face it, we live in a youth-oriented culture, right? So the question is, what is old? So if you were to line up 200 people, okay, from youngest to oldest, I'm not going to tell you what the beginning age or the ending age would be. Let's say starting at 21 and going to 95. What would you set as the demarcation mark for old? Think in your mind what number would translate into old for you. Oh, right at this point, there it is. That's our old group. Oh, on this side is our young group. My guess is no two of you would have come up with the same number. What I've heard the definition of old is your age plus 15. Okay, so whatever age you are, add 15 and that'll be old. Now, as you move through those years, obviously, that will push out to older and older. So what exactly does it mean when someone says, who would hire me because of my age? Well, our talk today is about those of you who might consider yourself to be old, might be considering hiring someone old, or are planning to be old someday. So hopefully everyone in the group falls into one of those three categories. So let's talk about something called the longevity bonus. So I love doing these talks because it gives me an opportunity to do research. As of February 2019, 20% of Americans aged 65 and older, which was about 10.6 million people, were either working or looking for work. Now you could say, oh, well, these people had to work. Well, when I looked more deeply into it, actually, these were among people who were more highly educated and had higher income levels. Their net worth, their median net worth of these individuals was like $706,000. So these were not people who were struggling. What I think they had in common is they loved to work. They really didn't think of work as work. It was simply an extension of using their skills and talents. And 77% of these Americans had no limitations in the work that they could do. So think about that, over age 65. And did you know that currently there are over 55,000 Americans who are over the age of 100? Okay, so the number of centenarians in this country is growing. So the likelihood of you moving into that category has increased over time. Now, another fun fact, in 2016, only 8.5% of the population of the world was over 65, and that was 617 million. By 2050, that will be at the 17%, or 1.6 billion people on the planet will be over that age. So what can we expect? Now, this is where we get into the meat of all of this. As we age, there is something that we can expect called neurodegeneration. And basically, it's part of the normal aging process where we begin to forget. And this is totally natural because the largest area of the brain that degenerates is related to memory. So how many of you have ever heard the term age-related memory loss? A couple of you have. Okay, so basically what that means is that as we age and parts of the brain are affected, we can forget things. We can forget names. We can forget other critical information. Oh, what was the name of that actor? Okay, and it might not come to you immediately, but eventually you'll recall it. Okay, that does not mean that you're, early onset dementia. It's just a natural process that people go through. I'm going to talk about some of the tools that you can use to help to retain that memory. The other thing that research shows is that people in their 70s are actually happier than their younger counterparts. Because at midlife, you can reset your expectations and you can enjoy the successes in your life more. Again, that really does depend also on whether or not your health maintains itself. So think about that as a plus in terms of that longevity bonus. Wow, being older isn't necessarily a negative. There are a lot of positives attached to it. So what are some of the new tricks that you can apply? Well, the aging brain tends to retain neural functioning through new learning and cognitive training. Okay, so remember one of our first questions was, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Got to get rid of that idea, okay? So one of the best ways to retain cognitive functions and memory, exercise. Why? It oxygenates the brain. So you want to look at where exercise fits into your life. Other activities, traveling. If you travel, think about what's involved with thinking. I know I travel around the world, and the way that I tend to use my thinking most is if I'm visiting a city I've never been to and I want to act as a tourist, I have to think, okay, here's where the hotel is. Here's where we're going. How do I backtrack to make sure I find my hotel again, especially if it's in a foreign land? So my brain is not only engaged in enjoying all the sensory stimulation of what I'm seeing and feeling around me, it's also having to think. And the more I think, the better it helps to retain, again, those cognitive functions. Using what we call mnemonic devices. And these are helpers in terms of memorizing things. So, they'll say, we'll create an acronym. You take the first letter of each key word, make it another word, and it helps you to remember. In the book that I wrote, it has 5 components to it. And the way that I helped remember it is creating the mnemonic device SPARK: self-confidence, perseverance, acceptance, resilience, commitment. See how quickly I can name them if I use that device? I encourage you to think of ways that you can do that will help your brain. Your vocabulary. Make sure that you're working every day to, let's say, learn a new word and its meaning. Sleep is really important. Remember that old adage about the older you get, the less sleep you need? That's not true. We need just as much sleep when we're older as we did when we were younger. And finally, art, which is an expression of a part of the brain that is that creative part of you. You don't have to be a great artist. Just enjoy what you're doing as a way to just maintain those thinking processes. So some of the other ways that you can help with retaining information is learn, if you're not already aware of it, of how you break information down into chunks. You all do it every day. You've been doing it all of your life with telephone numbers. If you notice, the way we chunk is in segments of like 3, 3, and 4. So you have your area code, your prefix, and then your last 4 numbers. Your social security number is also a way of chunking. So think about different addresses, memorizing an address. And I think one of the things that we've lost in terms of technology is remembering phone numbers. Why? All you do is you go to your phone, you hit the name, and it dials automatically. Heaven forbid something happens to that phone where you have to remember even family phone numbers because you're not thinking anymore. The other one is to repeat, repeat, repeat. The best way to unlearn a skill is not to practice it. Have you ever noticed that? If you don't use it, you lose it. There is truth to that. So whatever it is that you do in your work, make sure that you're building that repetition into it. And finally, learn how to feel it, actually feel it in your body when you're learning something new. How do the muscles respond? That's what we call muscle memory. How does all of that come into play with learning something new? So those are your new tricks. So we're going to open it up. I'm going to ask Pauline to unmute everyone and ask what skills or new knowledge have you gained in the last 6 months? Kelly?
We've learned a lot of new software programs since the shelter in place. We're using DocuSign, for our clients, and yeah, so a lot of new software. We've also undergone a lot of training on cybersecurity to prevent fraud and hacking and that sort of thing. So, and that's been on an ongoing basis. Every month we have new training that we're getting on cybersecurity. So lots of new programs.
Okay, new programs. One other one. What other new skill or knowledge have you attained? Yes, Regina?
New ways to stay active. I have had my Tai Chi class, my dance classes, and so forth that are no longer meeting together. So with my dance classes, for example, They have been putting everything on YouTube so that I can go out on my deck and listen to the music and do the practicing and so forth. Because being active, I think, I don't care what age you are, I think it's really important. So I'm glad that they took the steps that were needed to make sure that we could remain active, although we're sheltering in place for such a long period of time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've learned how to Zoom, haven't we?
Yeah.
Think about 5 years ago, was Zoom even in our vocabulary in terms of what it does technologically? Yes. So these are ways in which you can retain cognitive functioning in the brain. It doesn't mean that it will stop it. It may slow it down for you, which is great as we age. So the next question or the next statement was, there's no such thing as a stupid or dumb question. Have you ever heard that? Okay, so Carl Sagan says there are naive questions. There are tedious questions. There are ill-phrased questions, but every question is a cry to understand the world. And the other one I really like is if you ask a question, it makes you look stupid for 5 minutes. If you don't ask, you stay stupid for 50 years. So think about that one. So let's go over some of this. So what keeps us from asking questions? Well, maybe we don't know what to ask. We have difficulty putting into words. We don't want to appear to be ignorant, so we say nothing and stay ignorant. Or we're sometimes afraid of the answer. Maybe it's what we don't want to hear, so let's not ask that question. So let's talk about where asking questions fits into success, especially as we age. So questions push people to figure answers on their own. It helps to discover how we think, what our thinking processes are, what our mental blocks are, what are some of the ways that stop us from thinking and asking questions. And it also gives us a mindset for how we work toward achieving our goals. So what I'd like to do is to give each of you a little task. I want you to find someone that you trust, and I want you to have them ask you, how are you doing? And typically we give a one-word answer, don't we? Fine, okay? That doesn't really answer it. What you want to do is when you get them to ask you that question, give your response in how you're feeling physically, mentally, and emotionally. So really get into understanding where you are in the moment. That's a great question. So what's the power of asking questions? Well, it's how we learn about life. The more questions that we ask, the more information we get that provides us with more options. They help form new patterns in the brain. It allows you to form new perspectives, and it allows you to go from less surface questions to deeper questions. Surface questions are, what time is it? And a deeper question is, what does happiness mean to me? So you want to be focusing more on those deeper questions that force you to go through different processes. If you're a person in leadership, it helps to uncover the challenges and generate better solutions. You can increase the capacity and potential of your employees, leading to innovation and growth. And finally, it keeps you in the learning mode versus the judging mode. So when you're asking questions, you want to limit your question to one sentence so you get a clear answer. Have you ever had someone ask multiple questions at one time and you go, which one am I answering? And they're not clear as to which one you're answering. So one at a time, you provide options only if there are only two options. The most common is, would you like chocolate or vanilla? If those are the two flavors that you have available, that's what you ask people. Otherwise, you ask, what flavor would you like? And you keep it open-ended. You want to keep your questions neutral. You don't want to bias by asking a leading question, which indicates where you want it to go in terms of their answer. And finally, you want to talk less and listen more. It's the old adage of it's why we have two ears and one mouth. Most of us have been taught to speak, but not how to listen. That was one of the nice perks about getting a degree in counseling. We really had to learn how to listen. Okay, next. With age comes wisdom. How many of you have ever heard of that statement? Okay, so we have what we call wisdom insurance as we age. And this includes humility. We tend to be hopefully more humble, more accepting of who we are and what we have to offer. We have what we call emotional intelligence. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. That's a big buzzword. So right now, how many of you have heard the term emotional intelligence? Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then finally, wisdom. Older people have a vast storehouse of solutions that allow you to synthesize more information and thereby offer more solutions. So for us, we can go into all those memory banks and we will say, oh, that reminds me of a time when. That's more accessible to us as we age than for a 20-year-old. They just don't have the same number of experiences. It's what time gives them. So it's capitalizing on all of that. And then with emotional intelligence, it's looking at your self-awareness. How much do you know yourself? And the book that I wrote is clearly focused on self-awareness in, out of work, meaning that here's an opportunity to develop that self-knowledge. There are certainly plenty of resources out there in terms of how to interview, how to write a successful resume, but knowing who you are, has been a part of the advice that we've been given over millennia. Empathy, the ability to listen and understand other people's points of view. So as you're listening, imagine yourself in their shoes. What is it that they're trying to communicate to you? If they're coming across as frustrated, what's underneath that frustration for them? Are they not feeling like they're being heard? Is this the 10th person they've talked to on a call where they've been transferred from one party to another and have to repeat their story every time? All of that. Social skills, caring, understanding other people's needs, how to build relationships with people. And one of the things that we know is as we age, we do have long-term relationships with individuals. And what's the foundation for that? Why is it that some relationships last over 40 years and some last in only one interaction? So look at that and what constitutes the foundation of that successful relationship for you and how you can take that into the workplace. And finally, motivation. What motivates you? I did a whole talk on that. Are you motivated by external influences like money, awards, trips that you can earn? And there's nothing wrong with that. Those are just external ways that cause us to move forward. Or are you a person who's more internal? So there's an internal sense of achievement and accomplishment. So you set your own standards. You set that goal. And you say, okay, I'm going to take these steps in order to achieve that. And again, as we age, we have more of a list of successes that we can build upon in order for us to understand motivation. So the other thing is you want to allow yourself at this time to be a beginner. Now, Kelly, you were talking about new programs that you're learning. Allow yourself to go back and do something that you've never done before. And allow yourself to recall what that is like for you so that it helps you to understand other people and what they might be going through when they're learning a new task. I recently was certified in networking. And I will tell you, I was a new beginner in using the program, and there were a number of times where I just wanted to quit. It was so frustrating, but I thought, no, this is important to me. So I would ask 1,000,001 questions in order to understand that. Eventually, I got to the point where I could actually use the program. But it took a while. And with some people, some tasks are easier to learn than others. Did you know that in asking why questions, we've always, in my training, it was like, don't ever ask why. We need to ask why questions. A child between the ages of 2 and 5 asks an average of 40,000 questions. What happens at the age of 5? They go to school, right? And guess what the school does? We don't ask questions, okay? You're here to learn what we tell you. So that drops off. I was a school teacher for many years, but one of the things that I did was get my students to ask those why questions. And by the way, those students are still in touch with me, and they're grandparents now. And they tell me how important that was to them, because they're still doing that. They don't always, you know, the other person doesn't always like being asked the why question, but they get what they need. So if you're changing your occupational field, this is great because you enter into a whole new area without those old biases. So that's something to think about is at this age. If you're going to change careers, boy, ask a lot of questions. Well, why can't we do that? Well, it's because we just have always done it this way. But why can't we do it a different way? That old way doesn't seem to be very effective. And it's really getting people to think outside the box because you're thinking outside the box. So along with age comes good judgment. We're able to choose environments that are better matches for us and how we function. When we're in our 20s, chances are we just pretty much take anything that's a job, but we tend to become or should become more selective as we age. You can cut through the clutter. You're going to be able to get to the core issue much faster. You no longer need to impress or prove yourself to others. You know what you're able to do. You have a higher level of emotional intelligence. You can recognize patterns more easily. That's the brain working. And finally, you move into a point where you're looking at giving rather than taking. So many people as they age say, I've gotten so much from the work that I've done. Now it's my turn to give. So that's where we can step into stewardship as we age, looking at a higher purpose. So think about people over 60 who have achieved success. Laura Ingalls Wilder, Little House on the Prairie, wrote those books at the age of 65. Estelle Getty, who was in Golden Girls, was given that role at the age of 63. Grandma Moses, the famous painter, was 78 when she began to paint. And Colonel Sanders was 65 when he started Kentucky Fried Chicken. So do not let age hold you back. I'm 72. At 71, I published my first book. I've got 2 in the wings that are getting ready to be published. I never thought of myself as a writer. I thought, why not? And as a result of presentations I did, I created my first book. So anything is possible. It's the limitations you place on yourself that can get in the way. So finally, okay, this is going to be, I think, my favorite spot as we end this, because I think it's important to have some levity in all of this. Just when I think I've seen it all, I haven't. And this is the fun thing about getting older. So I was thinking that, finding my research telling me that the average person lives, believe it or not, 25,915 days. Did you know 41% of it is looking at your technological devices? That's scary. 30% of it is spent sitting. And if you could laugh, you would laugh 481,760 times. So let's see if we can add to that as we close today. So these are your what were you thinking moments. So two of them that come to mind for me are observing someone who was driving their car while they were reading a book. The book was in their lap, okay? And they were driving. Work-related was when I was a vice principal, seeing teachers sleeping in their classroom in full view of people passing by. This was during school time. So those were my what were you thinking moments. So let's open it up and we'll just end with some of your what were you thinking moments. So Pauline, do you want to unmute everyone?
Yeah, each person's able to unmute themselves.
Okay, so unmute yourselves if you want to share and tell us what some of the funniest things that you've observed in life where you think just what I've seen it all. Okay, let's start with Penny. Oh no, Kelly.
I have to think about it.
Okay, how about
nothing pops in right away.
Okay, someone else think of anything that they've observed that go, oh, I can't believe this. How about you, Regina? Anything for you?
Yeah, I have to think about it as well.
You got to think about it as well. Okay. No?
Yeah, sure. Like I've seen people driving on doing all sorts of stuff on their cell phones, reading, sending text messages, talking, like you name it. I've definitely seen it. And to me, of course they shouldn't, right? But yeah, that to me is the glaring obvious, like happens all the time, I think, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about when there are these shows on television like America's Funniest Home Videos and things like that, where people are always doing very, very strange things and coming just short of killing themselves, I think, sometimes. But I can't remember any specific incident right now that really comes to mind.
Well, we have the, there's no such thing as a stupid question, but obviously there is such a thing as a stupid behavior.
Yeah.
We certainly see enough evidence of that, don't we?
Sure.
Think about, as you go through your day to day, what have you observed that you ask yourself, what were they thinking? And you can add that to your repertoire in terms of, as you've aged, just when you thought you've seen it all, people who will take a bite of something in a store and then put it back. What were they thinking? Okay, these are some of the other things we run into. Okay, so as we end today, I want to get your feedback. How has this been helpful to you? Going over some of this. I know we only had a half an hour.
It helps us to focus on the positive instead of the negative about being older, just being able to focus on these positive aspects of it is good and helpful.
Good.
And the fact that we limit ourselves sometimes rather than seeing the possibilities. I think that's the good message too about what you've been saying today, the fact that there are some things that as you get older, you have more of that you can take advantage of if you just recognize those things. We put limitations on ourselves, as you mentioned before. So more empathy, better intelligence, and so forth. You mentioned several things that people have advantages of as they continue to get older.
Mm-hmm. So if you're going into an interview, think about what we talked about today and how you can position yourself in terms of that information, what you bring to the setting that gives you an advantage and how it will make a difference for the company that hires you. And in the same sense, if you are hiring someone, if they show up and they appear to be older, and we really never did give it an age, what is it that they would bring? So it's about, your own biases around age. Because as I said, we do live in a youth-oriented culture. And I will tell you, when I worked in an agency and I had the people who were Grace's age come in, you know what they would say to me? No one will hire me. For them, it's because they don't have experience. And no one will hire them for the position where they can begin to build that. When you're older, that's all behind you. You don't have to worry about that. It's like, okay, here's what you need. Here's what I can deliver. That's what that's all about. And your age speaks for itself in that way. So I know we've come to the end of our 30 minutes. So the next time you refer to someone, including yourself, as being old, think about today's talk and how you spent these 30 minutes.
Yeah, Penny, did you have a question? Oh, you have to unmute.
Yeah, hit your mute button.
There we go.
And it'll unmute you. Oh,
there you
okay,
go. You got it.
There I am. No, I just had a comment. I think that, I mean, I'm 73 and I'm looking for a job again, and I'm a nonprofit fundraiser, but I think that the fact that I've had a lot of success in doing that and been in sales before that, I bring the experience to the table. The issue is you have to walk a fine line, because you have to figure out the person that you're speaking with that has that hiring decision. Are they looking to just have someone jump in and do a great job, or are they looking for someone to make them look good? And a lot of them get very defensive if you try to make other suggestions or anything that have happened to you. And that, I've learned it this way. This is what happened when I did it this way. And I mean, I've done everything that could fail. I've done everything that could succeed. And here's what happened. They don't want to hear that. They really want to make themselves look good. And if they don't feel you're the type that's going to do that, they're not going to hire you.
And there are those types out there, Penny. So one of the ways that you can position yourself is to ask them to tell me about your biggest challenge in the work here at this agency. And you do your due diligence in terms of listening. And, have you ever thought about, so if you notice you're not telling them, have you ever thought about the idea of whatever that could, raise whatever they're dealing with? So that could increase donor funding, things like that. Yes, because I do a lot of work with personality type, and the personality type that tends to rise into those positions, that tends to be a perspective that they have. So it makes it challenging for individuals. So you have to learn how to work around that.
First, you have to identify it.
Yes, you do. Yep. And the way you do that, of course, hopefully everyone is doing that, is you vet out the company beforehand. You get to learn who these people are who are doing the interviewing. What keeps them up at night? What's their greatest challenge? And what can you bring to the table that can help them sleep at night?
Yep. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what you said, David, earlier a couple of times about the youth-oriented culture, that's definitely true. I went through it's almost like people say plug and play. They try to do plug and play with people, but people with many, many years of experience versus a college grad. What are you getting? Well, you pay them less, but you don't have those years of experience. And on paper, plug and play is much easier. They don't take the experience in accounting for that at all. So that we can pay them much less, but again, you're not getting the experience.
That can happen.
Yep.
Any other thoughts as we end today? Okay. Well, again, as you go through your day, think about age and how it affects you and what you learned today and how you can apply that in your life. And when you get those thoughts of, oh, what was that name again? Just don't beat yourself up, okay? Just say, oh, this is part of the aging process. And I can improve on this by using some of the tools that were discussed today. And what I find is eventually that information does come to me. And then the other thing is, how important was it anyway? You know, how important was it that I remember the name of an actor that was in a movie from my childhood? Yeah, so think about that. As how important is it? Now, if it's a matter of where did I leave my car keys, that's a little more important. So you may want to have a place where you always put your car keys, so you don't have to think about that. Lots of different strategies that you can use. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. If you know of anyone who could use my services, please feel free to send them my way. I do offer a free, no obligation consultation to determine how and whether or not we could work together.